Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on your location in the world. I want to welcome you to this session on community resilience through empowerment. A panel that will look at how empower Arctic residents, in particular women and indigenous peoples, and what role empowerment plays in resilience of communities. My name is Embla Oddsdóttir, and I'm director of the Icelandic Arctic Cooperation Network here in Iceland. I'm also the chair of the SDWG Social, Economic and Cultural Expert Group. We have with us an excellent group of panelists today, starting with Kristal Martin Lapenskie, who is the president of National Inuit Youth Council, who will be discussing empowering Arctic indigenous youth. We have Valeeva, research associate at the Institute for Advanced Sustainability Studies, who will be discussing IMAL 2040 scenarios for the Russian Arctic. We also have with us Isak Utsi, who is mayor of Arjeplog in Sweden, who will be discussing empowerment through the lens of a small Nordic community. And then finally, we have Marya Rozanova Smith, professorial lecturer at the George Washington University and advisor to the Chancellor at the Russian State Hydrometeorological University. And with her, Andrey Petrov, who is director of the ARCTICenter at the University of Northern Iowa, and is also a part of our wonderful project on gender equality in the Arctic. These two are both lead authors on empowerment in that report. I want to start by welcoming Kristal Martin Lapenskie. Kristal, if you want to, you can expand a little bit on your introduction, but other than that, the floor is yours if you're ready.
Thank you. Good, Kristal Martin Lapenskie. Good morning, everybody. I'm Kristal Martin Lapenskie, and as it was mentioned, I'm the president for the National Inuit Youth Council here in Canada, and also known as NIYC for short. So NIYC is part of Inuit Canadami, ITK, which is the national body representing Inuit in Canada. And our role within NIYC is to advance the priorities of Inuit youth in Canada. Much of the priorities are intertwined with our national body, ITK, in that, the cultural and language sovereignty aspect, and that to be an important part of who we are. And I'm not sure if many have knowledge surrounding our history here in Canada and even across the circumpolar Arctic. But our history here in Canada is also very recent, where we have been and continue to be impacted by historical trauma, and culture and language is one of the identities that we carry that has almost been ripped apart from us. So we have been really trying to advance, and not just advance, but work closely with our Inuit organizations and regional organizations in providing cultural programs, on the land initiatives, and also language as well. So we also have one of the highest suicide rates in Canada, along with one of the highest rates of food insecurity, while also dealing with housing crisis in our communities. So all of those kind of plugged together has definitely Sorry, I'm just getting some whispering in my headphones. Like, kind of getting sidetracked. Sorry. Yeah, so it's been one of those areas where though we have been impacted by this historical event, there is such a large movement amongst Inuit youth and young adults, and really pushing for self-determination and ensuring that we have control and ownership of our own people. And I do want to recognize that today is also the anniversary of the Nunavut government, which is an Inuit region in northern Labrador in Canada. So today is Nunavut Day, and wishing all of my Nunavut mute Inuit a very great day today. Nunavut was actually the first Inuit region in Canada to achieve self-government, which is a historical event and such a time to be proud of the achievements, of the successes, of even the challenges in our communities that we've been able to overcome through our resiliency. And I really love the term resiliency and empowerment because they do play a significant role. So when you have these milestones that are marked and you have the opportunity to go, wow, like look at how far we have come. And we do have a lot of ways to go still, but these milestones are extremely impactful for our people. And it's really exciting to see so many changes that are occurring within our communities that are all driven by Inuit, for Inuit. Yeah, so I'm likely a little bit off topic here, but I really wanted to emphasize that component. But we also have, when I was talking about Inuit having the highest rate of suicide in Canada, along with the highest food insecurity and dealing with the housing crisis, one of the members of parliament for Nunavut, her name is Mumila Papa. She's a 27-year-old Inuk woman that was elected in last year, and so she is representing Nunavut and Nunavut Mute, but she's also an Inuk youth. And what really gave her the drive is really this suicide epidemic in our communities. She's a strong advocate. She has done a lot for our people in voicing these massive concerns that really impact our communities. So to see a 27-year-old that has traditional Inuit facial tattoos representing who we are and where we want to go is one of the most, I would say, empowering moments for Inuit and Inuit women, youth and girls and teens, and it's just really exciting. And that's one of the many aspects. And Locke's not the only one. There's so many as well that are silent, that are working in their communities, that are bringing programs and services into their communities to try and support their communities in whatever way possible, especially during COVID-19. Being a global pandemic, we've all been impacted by COVID-19 one way or another. But in Inuit communities, I think what's really shining light out of this situation is that the general Canadian population and even worldwide are starting to see the lack of infrastructure in our communities, the lack of healthcare, the lack of many different basic necessities that you would have anywhere else in Canada. We are lacking within our communities. And COVID-19 has really proven to the general population that this is this is a moment that we really need to start focusing on. And our Inuit leaders have been fantastic and really advancing those priorities so that Inuit are supported, that their people are supported, and that we can prevent the spread of not just COVID-19, but to try and now, identify some moving pieces regarding infrastructure, healthcare, education, employment, all of that in one. Yeah, it's such an honor to be here today. I'm really appreciative of everyone's time, and thank you.
Thank you very much, Crystal, and thank you for reminding us of the various and often challenging realities that face Arctic populations. I also think that you're providing us with a very positive message, where we can consider the movement as among youth and young adults to be a very significant movement towards empowerment, and for young adults to take over the reins to move further towards a sustainable development in the future. So thank you very much for that. I think what I'll do is I'll wait with the questions. Let's go through the presentations, and they then take questions in the end. What I would like the audience to do, however, is while our speakers are presenting, think about your questions and put them in the Q&A, and the organizers will try to get them to me so that we can answer them. In some cases, the organizers may direct a question directly to the panelists if they feel that this may be may save us some time, because we only have an hour, I believe. So next up is going to be Valeeva, Research Associate with the Institute for Advanced Sustainability Studies. So Vilena, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Embla. Can you see my presentation?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
As a Symposium, the institute where I'm working is specializing on transdisciplinary and co-creative research. This means that we are involving non-academic actors in the research process. In my presentation today, I would like to talk a little bit how such co-creative research practices and inclusion of Arctic residents in research projects can be beneficial for both Arctic residents and for scientists, and contribute to enhancing of resilience of Arctic communities. I will do it using the example of the Yamal 2040 case study that we have been conducting within the Horizon 2020 project selection, together with the Institute for World Economy and International Relations of Russian Academy of Science and Berlin Consulting Organization Foresight Intelligence. In this case study, we employed strategic foresight, a specific co-design and engagement methodology to support stakeholders from a specific region, Yamal region in Russia. The goals of the study were to develop greater capacity among stakeholders to adapt to climate change and to proactively prepare for alternative and uncertain futures of this region. The Yamal region is situated on the northern part of the West Siberian Plain and is watched by the Kara Sea from the north. It is one of the biggest regions in Russia, and it's also the capital of Russian oil and gas development. More than 80% of Russian gas, 80% of Russian gas is extracted here. This region is experiencing dramatic environmental changes due to climate change and industrial activities. Sea ice decline, permafrost thaw, coastal erosion, air and water pollution are already threatening Yamal communities and infrastructure, as well as flora and fauna. However, climate change is not the only factor influencing developments in Yamal. The future of this region is highly uncertain due to substantial climatic, environmental, economic, social, political changes in the global energy market in the decades to come. It was the project's goal to respond to the situation of general uncertainty and to develop forward-looking scenarios to better understand the risks and opportunities associated with future transformations in this region. These scenarios were co-developed together with stakeholders at a series of 3 workshops using the strategic foresight method. Foresight is a systematic thinking about uncertain futures. This method is used worldwide by politicians and business who want to transform uncertainties into opportunities. A scenario in this methodology is not focused, and it doesn't claim to predict the future. It's rather a thought experiment about future developments that provide better understanding of complex environments, making sense of uncertain futures and avoiding surprise. Scenarios that we developed within our case study take into account climate predictions as well as environmental, social, and cultural concerns, economic opportunities, and political and legal developments. Representatives of different stakeholder groups were involved from the Yamal stakeholder groups were involved from the beginning of the project and acted as co-authors of the elaborated scenarios. Among the participants, there were representatives of local communities, indigenous peoples and environmental NGOs, Yamal business, media, scientists, and so on. The elaborated scenarios envision different futures for the region. In one of them, Yamal's petroleum business is shrinking as a result of a global energy transition. In another scenario, Yamal's gas industry is by contrast booming because gas is viewed worldwide as a transition fuel. In 2 scenarios, Yamal experiences severe consequences of climate change, such as rain and snow event or anthrax outbreaks and mercury releases out of thawing permafrost. In contrast, the 3rd scenario projects cooling instead of warming in Yamal and Europe, resulting from the interaction of a number of unexpected factors, like uncoordinated geoengineering experiments and volcano eruptions. Facing an uncertain future, actors are confronted by a double challenge. First, no one can prepare for all future developments because time and attention are limited. Second, preparing for just one scenario would be betting on a single future. In the second phase of our project, the participants co-developed strategic options that might be robust and useful under all scenarios that we developed, and that they can be start implementing in their decision-making already now. In sum, I would like to say that the strategic foresight method proved to be an effective tool to engage stakeholders in research and thus enhance its quality. On the other hand, it served as a capacity-building tool. We got a very good feedback from participants of our case study. They improved their knowledge about the current and possible future impacts of climate change and other changes on their activities in Yamal. They also developed options how they can act in face of such an uncertain future and adapt and proactively prepare for possible development. Some of the participants told us that this project changed the way they approach the future, by sharing with them the advantages of being prepared for alternative development, which required investment in innovation and education. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Vilena. Thank you for sharing with us this very interesting project. I wonder if people want to find more out about the project, would you be willing to share a link to the project website in the chat?
Yeah, sure, I will do.
Okay, thank you. Next to speak is Isak Utsi, who is the mayor of Arjeplog, Sweden. Isak, can I see you?
I'm trying to start the camera. Can you see me now?
Not yet. Yes, there you are.
Perfect.
Go ahead.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, friends of Arctic, fellow panelists and attendees. I'm attending this symposium from Arjeplog, where I'm based. And first of all, I'd like to thank the organizers for inviting me to this panel. I followed parts of the conference yesterday and today, and the program and the talks are very interesting. Short about me before getting on. I'm the mayor of Arjeplog, and I've been so for about 2 months, and this is my first international attendance in this role. Before this, the full-time politics, I've been working with business development and public affairs in Luleå, which is the regional capital in the northernmost county here in Sweden, Norrbotten. And before that, I have been advocating for Sami rights for many years, and for a few years in a role as president of the Sami Youth Association in Sweden. Some short information about Arjeplog also. We're located in North Sweden, as I said, and Arjeplog is actually Sweden's most sparsely populated municipality. We have about 2,700 inhabitants on an area of almost 15,000 square kilometers. That means that every inhabitant here has about 5 square kilometers each. And further on about Arjeplog, we're a home for both high-tech innovations and the traditional indigenous livelihood of reindeer herding. We have a big portion of what is called winter testing for automobiles. Every manufacturer of cars have to try out their new systems in both warm and cold climate, and Arjeplog is a market leader globally in offering proving grounds for the winter testing, for cold climate testing. So given that we're a small municipality, but our population more than doubles every winter season, so about 2,500 engineers and other technical personnel are flying in here for a few months of work every winter. And so my first point being is that Arctic climate is important for both our testing industry, which is a big part of the industry in Arjeplog, but also for the traditional reindeer herding. So our economy and our cultural capital is tied to the climate. And the climate is a key factor to keep our community alive. Some points about how do we get resilient Arctic communities. First, I would like to say something on a general level. As a small municipality with a city council that handles and has mandate of a turnover of only 20 million euros in total, and less than 270 employees, of whom only 3 individuals work with long-term strategy, we have a lack of institutional capacity. That means that it's not only hard for us to handle the administrative parts of, example, EU funding, it's also a difficult task actually to ensure that the organization itself can identify the strategic needs for both the community, for industry, for businesses in Arjeplog. So it's important that we continue to recognize the different capabilities we have. Even as a formal structure, as a municipality, we have a lack of that. And policymakers need to ensure that the programs have a large portion of flexibility and fits the needs that the structures have on local level. For instance, a program is often designed on a national level, and the grant authority may sometimes have a few measurements to adapt the program for a local level. We have large municipalities and we also have tiny municipalities. I also like to make one point about keeping the youth and education. As many other small Arctic communities, we have a decline in population. We have a demography of less youths and more seniors, so it's kind of bending over. And about 13% of the population in Arjeplog have a university degree, compared to the 27% in general in Sweden. And it's lower among men and as often higher among women. So what we do is that we work to ensure that there are more options for higher education locally. That means strong collaborations with universities and other providers of education. That is important to create, for instance, semi-digital platforms that can give more individuals access to the academia. And it's also important to make this to make it able for more of the young people, the youth, to stay in our hometowns, especially for indigenous peoples. One example from an indigenous perspective is that it's sometimes a choice between educating yourself, going to a university, or learning, maintaining, and developing a cultural heritage back at home. So sometimes it is a should I stay or should I go situation, which can be very hard and stressing. So, and we also know that the access to higher education is important for any community in general. It's linked to health, life expectancy, income, and so on. And an educated population is almost always also a key factor for a growing community. And a high level of education creates the mass that you need to grow ideas and enterprises. So we need to stop the brain drain. And the next point I have of 3 is that the politics and the policy on a local level has to mirror the indigenous interests. For a community like ours in Arjeplog, it's very important that the local decision-making mirror the needs that the indigenous people have, both culturally, but also in the aspect of businesses and entrepreneurship. And therefore, we need to formalize and codify input from these different groups and from the Sami people, for example, in our long-term strategies. And in order to do so, it's important that we always value and recognize indigenous issues and indigenous entrepreneurship in all process and policy making that we do. For instance, we have a lot of stakeholders with needs of large areas in our municipality. We have tourism, forestry, wind power, hydropower, we have reindeer herding, we have car test industry, and so on. And therefore, it's important that we in our long-term planning have that we make sure that the process is including and that all parties are able to meet on a same level basis and have the same resources to attend. And my third point is about businesses. Sami businesses, indigenous businesses, are often small. They are based on traditional livelihood and with focus on sustainability and cultural values. The OECD made a study a few years ago describing the potential gaps between regional development and Sami businesses. And the findings are interesting. And one of them is that we need to include indigenous peoples or the Samis in local, regional, and EU level politics for rural development. For instance, in the aspect of reproduction of traditional knowledge and culture, because these factors that are important for the Sami, the indigenous businesses, are not always seen as the right economic development objective in the grants. And the other part of that, the third point, is support systems. We need to have support systems on local and regional level that are inclusive and have a knowledge about indigenous entrepreneurship, sustainability, cultural heritage, and not only focus on growth. That is important to include the Sami businesses in those support systems. Yeah, thank you.
Well, thank you, Isak. It sounds to me like even if you do have some challenges, like the rest of us, that you've somehow managed to significantly diversify your economy, which of course is an important factor in community resilience, and kind of found spaces to do so in a creative thought process of what is possible for the local community. Next up is going to be Marya Rozanova Smith and with Andrey Petrov. We're not entirely sure how they are going to go about this two-people presentation, but I believe Marya is going to start and then Andrey will take over. So go ahead, Marya and Andrey.
Oh, we have the same background. That's good.
As always.
Okay. Yes, but I mean, it's not by accident that we have the same background. It's because we, of course, represent a wonderful project that Embla already mentioned, gender empowerment in the Arctic. And we're going to talk about that. Marya, if you could just flip the slides to the beginning. So gender in the Arctic project, just to say a few words, and Embla could add if she wants. But it's a long-term initiative by the Sustainable Development Working Group of the Arctic Council. Marya, if you could flip to the next one. That is actually started, from what I know, in 2013, and has been going on since then. And the first report was issued in 2015, I think. But the idea is to look into the gender equality defined in various ways, look at the discourses of gender, look at the economy, look at the politics, look at the civic engagement, education, social realities, and of course, sustainability that all depend on the thrivability, as you will see in a second, the thrivability of all genders in our Arctic communities. The new report is coming up in 2021. It will be a part of deliverables by its Icelandic chairmanship to the Arctic Council Sustainable Development Working Group. So I encourage everyone to, of course, wait for it and read it when it comes. It has 6 chapters focusing on law and governance, migration, mobility, gender and environment, violence, reconciliation, security, and of course, the empowerment, which Marya and myself going to talk about today. Next slide, please. But first of all, also, I would like to acknowledge and thank our wonderful group of contributors and supporters. Again, the report is supported by various countries, various ministries, various agencies, such as National Science Foundation, that helps us, various ministries of foreign affairs, but it's really the group of authors that is most exciting. These are members of academia, these are members of communities, representative of indigenous organizations, and of course, policymakers. All of them kind of came together to brainstorm on the issues of gender empowerment in the Arctic. So yes, next slide. So our basic idea is to look at empowerment through the lens of 3 domains. These 3 domains represent different aspects of empowerment. There's a political empowerment, economic and civic empowerment. Sustainable, resilient communities are the communities that have political empowerment of its people, that have economic self-reliance. Just Isak was saying, right? I mean, it's very important that we have economic self-reliance, and of course we have opportunity for civic engagement. With all these complicated questions that a lot of members of Arctic communities face, for example, whether to stay or go, I mean, the most important part in terms of empowerment is to empower decisions, that they have opportunities to make whatever decisions they want to, the best of themselves, that would allow them to pursue their dreams and their opportunities. And if we have that, if we have political empowerment, economic self-reliance, and civic engagement, what we have as a result is a resilient community that could embark on a path of sustainable development. But most importantly, there's a community that can attain thriving. I mean, we're really looking into not just sustaining what we have. We're looking at Arctic communities to be able to thrive, to be able to develop in the ways that they would like to. It will bring prosperity, well-being in the ways that they define it. And when we have all genders having equal and important equitable part in this process, that's in only then we have resilient, we have thriving community in front of us. So I think Marya will go a little bit in depth, and I'll come back to wrap up the talk. Marya?
Yes. Thank you, Andrey. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Wonderful. First of all, I would like to express my deep gratitude to organizers of this wonderful panel. And in accordance with our academic traditions, I would like to start briefly with definitions of empowerment. So gender political empowerment, economic political empowerment, and civic empowerment. These are three domains that we are focusing on in our research, and Andrey has already presented them. So what is gender political empowerment? In this sphere, we research how all genders' capabilities and achievements can be enhanced to engage and influence the local, regional, and national government institutions that serve the needs of their communities and constituencies, equal and meaningful participation in political decision-making, and responsibility sharing in all spheres and at all levels. The next sphere of empowerment is gender economic empowerment that includes all genders' ability to participate equally in existing markets, equal and meaningful participation in economic decision-making in all spheres and again at all levels. And the final domain is civic empowerment, which we define as a process of enhancing the capacity of civil society actors to articulate and facilitate change of gender-related social norms and practices. So one of our project's novelties was formulating measurable indicators to describe gender empowerment specifically designed for the Arctic regions. And as we identified that we can talk not just about one Arctic, but many. Based on these indicators, our research identified divergent gender empowerment trends across the Arctic regions and communities, aid and closing or sometimes widening gender gaps. It is also important to note that this system of indicators that you can see now on the screen and the very concept of power, control, and competition in many aspects are not applicable to many indigenous communities, especially those dependent on the subsistence economy and pursuing a traditional way of living. So here I would like to just suppose two maps that we designed with our Norwegian partners, gender balance, sorry, I'm still fighting with technologies, gender balance of total population and gender representation in elected regional and city bodies across the Arctic regions. So focusing on political empowerment, we can see that with the exception of Russia, there has been the highest female gender ratios in most Arctic regions that have slightly lower male gender ratios. At the same time, an indicator of women's representation in elective regional and city bodies demonstrates that except for Chukotka region in Russia and some Nordic regions of Västerbotten, Norrbotten in Sweden, and Nordland in Norway, women remain less likely to participate in the political sphere than men across the Arctic regions. Gender segregation appears in the spheres of politics and public administration, both as vertical segregation in form of clustering of men at the top of leadership hierarchies and horizontal segregation when women are less likely to have access to certain spheres of politics where the stakes are specifically high in the Arctic. For example, such traditional main domain as natural resource management policies, infrastructure development, industrial policies, etc., etc. And at the same time, women are outnumbered in spheres traditionally considered as female domain of politics that are usually less lucrative, and for instance, school, but again, very, very important, for instance, school education, social family policies, to some extent, medicine and culture. And here, also, if we just suppose another two maps, gender gap in tertiary attainment level and the gender earning gaps when we're measuring economic empowerment, we see that existing gender gap in tertiary attainment level in all Arctic regions except the Faroe Islands indicates a trend of feminization of human capital in the Arctic that we already mentioned today. It also reveals a paradox. When women have high educational attainment, but are likely to be paid less or much less, up to 40% than men, with exception here in Nunavut. Women are also less likely than men to get enrolled and obtain leadership positions in such spheres as natural resource industries, military, science and technologies, what we say STEM professions. Overall, despite women's increasing participation in the workforce, traditional gender-based division of labor prevails, and traditional female occupations are mostly in social spheres nowadays in most regions of the Arctic. And we were thinking about the policy-relevant highlights that we can recommend, and I give the floor to Andrey back to present those findings.
Yeah, so some preliminary thoughts on what it all means. Well, first of all, of course, we're talking about empowering all genders. And that's, of course, creates opportunities for meaningful participation and decision-making and responsibility of both things, right? Decision-making and responsibility sharing are more important. And that they percolate to all spheres, not particular elements of those spheres, not particular silos in which certain genders are segregated, but actually building the opportunity for all genders to participate in community life. That underpins, of course, community sustainability and creates thriving communities. Moving gender empowerment from the periphery to the center of public policy, I think that's very important, especially in some regions. And understanding that without equality and equity, it will not be possible to attain sustainable development goals that many countries in the Arctic proclaimed and trying to achieve. And that's, of course, an important aspect that must be there. Of course, we need to make sure that all genders, especially women, are able to participate in political, economic, and civic spheres. And we need to make sure that we give opportunity, as I already said, to people to make their own decisions, to be empowered, to have faith control over their own destinies, but also allowing communities to have resources and opportunities to control their own destiny. But I think very importantly, is to what Marya alluded already, is that there is no one solution, a one-size-fits-all policy that could be applied to the entire Arctic. We have very diverse communities and very diverse understandings of what gender equality means, and we need to make sure that these regional, local levels of empowerment are also done in the ways that the communities are interested in pursuing. In this particular case, of course, our indigenous communities, they have their own ways. And in many, we hear a lot from our collaborators that the definitions, understandings of gender and empowerment of both need to be scrutinized and maybe redefined in some ways while adhering to the traditions and to the understandings of our indigenous partners. And that, I think, is very important. But most importantly is that thriving all genders will contribute and deepen thriving in the communities. Without thriving genders, we cannot have sustainable development and communities could not be well and thriving. So that's, I think, the main highlights from the report, but please look into having the full version in a few months. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Marya and Andrey. I think your presentation has very clearly made that link for us between gender empowerment and community resilience. So reminding us that it is indeed so important to continue to highlight these issues as they are central to sustainable development. And I particularly like that you're using the term thriving, because too often we are focused on surviving. But of course the goal really should be thriving. So thank you very much for this. That concludes our presentations for today, but we do have 15 minutes or so for questions and answers. I encourage the audience to paste their questions in the questions and answers box or in the chat if they can't find the Q&A box. But I might go ahead and start with one that I think might be particularly for Isak. Could the panelists please turn on your camera so that we can see your faces, all of you? back in the old day, you never used to have to do this. Can you please turn your face on? So Isak, I was just a little bit curious. You talked about retaining youth and the problem of brain drain, and I think this is something that all of us that have either lived or worked in the region, we do know that this is an issue in most communities. I don't know what the situation in terms of access to education is in Arjeplog, but could you comment on your view, sort of in general, on the significance of locally attainable education in communities or regions, and that would include higher or tertiary education? Could you tackle that one, please?
Yes, I can. We have identified education as a key factor for Arjeplog to be a thriving municipality, a growing municipality, and to stop the decline in population, which has accelerated a lot since the 60s. We got a gymnasium in Arjeplog in the 90s, 1993, which was the first time when inhabitants of Arjeplog could go to a gymnasium locally in Arjeplog. And we are a municipality that is very far away from other, both from the universities. It's at least 3 hours drive to the closest university, and it's about 1 hour to the closest gymnasium, except from the one we have here in Arjeplog. One thing which is important is that with a declining population, we have less money to actually make welfare production of. And today we're actually facing a situation where we can no longer have our gymnasium. We can no longer fund it with our own taxpayers' money. And a lot of communities in the north are facing the same situation. We are becoming too small to actually hold up educational platforms in the traditional way. So what we're looking at now, which is very important, and I think it's what is going to make Arctic communities survive, is digitalization. From the last few months, we have learned that universities, for instance, have had a very high pace. They have gone from a very traditional way of giving education to a very digital new way, finding new ways in the bureaucracy to make it happen. And I think we have to do that with all kinds of educations, also on a gymnasium level, so to speak. So yeah, it's very important, but it's also a very hard task to solve when you're becoming smaller and smaller.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think you're completely right. And I think digitalization and distance learning is probably going to be a very significant factor in maintaining local populations. But at the same time, we do also have regions in the Arctic that don't have necessarily adequate access to connectivity. So perhaps connectivity is really should be a primary objective to resolve in the region. Thank you, Isak. Kristal, I wonder, can I pick on you a little bit? So you talked about youth empowerment and movements in sort of taking charge of own well-being in communities. And I'm wondering if you could, for us less youthy here in the panel, because we've had a discussion about this, how to more effectively engage with youth, also through the Gender Project. Do you have any pointers for us on what is the best way for us to have this conversation so that both the less youthy generation can perhaps provide more support for younger adults? Do you have any advice for us? What is the best way to approach this?
I think, considering the current pandemic that we're in, I would otherwise recommend community engagement, being present, and actually, going out to their hangout spots. It's not always, not every community has a youth center, but there's always somewhere that the youth go to hang out, like community halls. But with the pandemic, what has been really empowering and so inspiring to see amongst Indigenous youth, period, not just Inuit, this is Indigenous people, Indigenous youth, and they've been really using social media as their platform to bring awareness about who we are, our culture, our language, trying to revitalize our language, trying to revitalize traditional practices like hunting or sewing or, whatever it might be. And the biggest social media platform that Indigenous youth are using, at least here in Canada, is TikTok. TikTok is really massive right now, and it really spreads. It doesn't just stay here in Canada, it's across this globe, where people from all over the world are intrigued by this, and they're, themselves being inspired by that. But it's also very, for youth. I've been using social media as well as a way to stay connected. And to exchange cultures, to exchange, a way of life in communities. And it really has played a positive role amongst Inuit youth and Indigenous people in Canada as well.
Okay, thank you. This is very good advice. I have recently heard that there is such a thing as TikTok, but I have yet to sample it. I'm a little bit worried because I've just started an account on Instagram, and I think I have one or two photographs on there. It doesn't come naturally.
If you get on TikTok, you might get hooked.
Okay. Well, we have a question here from the audience, which is a kind of a broad question in a way, in that any of the panelists could jump in on this. Perhaps we don't have time for everyone to chime in, but some of you might be able to. So what are some of the roadblocks that you have encountered yourself, or have you witnessed roadblocks that specifically seem to hamper empowerment? And we can start with whoever wants to go first, basically. You might want a moment to think. So, Isak, I think we're missing someone on camera. Vilena. Where is Vilena? Why do I not see her?
I'm here.
Oh. Okay. Marya, do you want to because you've been sort of swimming in material that is related to empowerment. Do you remember a specific example of something that hampers empowerment?
There are different initiatives. Again, we can talk about three spheres: political, economic, and civic. I really would like to maybe to say a few words about civic, since it wasn't a part of the presentation. We really have really fantastic initiatives, like bottom-up initiatives in the Arctic, for example. Let me see, in the Northwest Territories in Canada, She Can. This is a fantastic campaign that actually it's like educational campaign platform to make sure that women have enough, they are encouraged enough to go and to participate in politics, let's say in election at the regional, local, and even national levels. Another, for example, maybe a campaign that I can also mention is Girls for Girls. It's international, it's not just for the Arctic. So I believe that and another thing, another campaign which is very important, not even campaign, but a project, it's male talking groups, because it's not just about female empowerment, but also, especially in some communities across the Arctic, male find themselves in the position when they are losing their I would say self-empowerment, and they feel that they are disempowerment and do not really have this sense of self-destiny, self-control. And these talking groups actually help them to prevent such deviant behaviors as maybe frustration or aggression, and finally go back on trend and self-empower themselves. So this is really important. Another project, especially Icelandic case, it's political level quotas. Quotas, again, in many countries, probably it's not the best, I would say, remedy, but in countries like, for example, Nordic countries or Iceland, let's say Iceland is probably the best example. It really helped to improve the situation in the political scale and also in economic sphere. So briefly, like I can mention this, but I believe in civic empowerment bottom-up initiatives, and also it would be great if they would be coupled by government initiatives as well.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you. Is anyone else that wants to chime in, either with good examples of initiatives for empowerment, or perhaps an example of a challenge or a hindrance to empowerment? Maybe we can do a quick round.
I'll jump in.
Yeah, please.
So for us, I believe, because politics is so new to Inuit, I mean, colonization for Inuit in Canada has been in the last 50 to 70 years. So, you know, this whole structure of municipalities and regions and territories and then the federal government and that kind of thing is relatively new to us. You know, Inuit had traditional laws that we had been born and raised on, and so this whole new system that the not just the government, the federal government, but all governments and all systems are really systemically discriminative in a sense that it doesn't look at traditional practices and traditional ways of life. You know, Inuit have these core values and principles called Inuit Kauimaiaktapangi, which is known as IQ principles. And those principles really were a way of survival and a way of thriving in the culture and we as people. So I find when it comes to challenges, it really does come down to the system, and the system that needs to be broken down so that it's sensitive to and open to Indigenous populations in Canada.
Mm-hmm. Yes, thank you. I think that sort of speaks also to what Andrey was saying, I think at the end of their presentation, about how one size fits all doesn't work in the Arctic. And I think perhaps sometimes the systems they're too simplified, so they are not able to embrace the diversity of populations. Anyone else want to chime in on this? Because if not, yes?
Yeah, I can, Vilena.
Yes, absolutely. Go ahead.
So, in our case study, we identified one of the important obstacles, the lack of participation of local communities and Indigenous peoples in decision making. So actually, one of our recommendations is active participation in political decision making, because with respect to other Yamal stakeholder groups, for example, business, they are well organized and they can more or less influence the politics. But with respect to local communities, Indigenous peoples, they are not that active now, and this active participation is the precondition to have a voice in shaping the long-term sustainable development in Yamal. So we recommend low-level grassroots political activities, political awareness, and participation.
Mm-hmm. Yes, absolutely. Thank you. Yeah, I think we all recognize that it does take time for this kind of activity to get started, to emerge, and to develop to a point where it really is truly an empowering dynamic that can feed off it. I want to. We're kind of running out of time, unfortunately. Time passes very quickly when you only have an hour and a lot of interesting people to talk with. I want to give each and every one of you an opportunity to perhaps provide a final remarks before we jump off. If we can start with perhaps Andrey, could you go first?
I just want to reiterate what I said, and I'm happy that other panelists thought it's an interesting way of framing it. The thriving community is the one that we're really searching for, and sometimes we really lose that perspective and in addressing very acute, important issues now. But I mean, thriving community is not just today; it's thriving community of tomorrow. And another thought I had is that it's not just one size fits all. It's just that also the southern ways don't fit the north as well. So we need to remember that when we deal with the issue of empowerment and involve our larger countries that, of course, are out there, I mean, we need to make sure that there's understanding of what the needs and aspirations of Arctic communities are versus how the same issues perceived in the south. So that's an important element as well, I think.
Thank you. I'm going to do this in order of camera. So, Vilena, could you go next?
Yeah, I just want to stress again the importance of co-creative practices, both decision-making, political decision-making, and research practices basically everywhere. We need to incorporate interest of all involved and all who have stakes in the object. So, yeah, so I just wanted to stress it again.
Excellent, thank you. Isak?
Okay, very short. I think we, as a community, should work with attracting young people to work with politics and policy making. A lot of people don't think it's interesting enough, and we need to have all perspectives represented in our decision making. I think that leads to belief in future and better politics.
Okay, excellent, thank you. Kristal?
I don't have much to add. I think the other panelists did a fantastic job in mentioning the ones that I would, but I also want to really emphasize the need for the collaborative approach with Indigenous people in the Arctic. Any work that's being done should be led and controlled by Indigenous people. And I think, that collaboration is really important, building relationships and relationships that are respectable as well are extremely important.
Okay, thank you. Who is left? Marya. Marya.
Sorry. Just a very general conclusion that I would like just to say that for very often we view the Arctic as a very new geopolitical hotspot or lucrative resource base. But actually, I believe that it's so important to focus not just on a conventional security, not on geopolitics, but also always remember that in the center of this region, we have people, diverse people. We really need to use inclusive approach and emphasize also on differences, not just on a majority of population of the Arctic. And it would be wonderful if we could contribute to investing in the human capital first, in the environment, and kind of leave other things behind and focus on social security, on communities, to make sure that people in the Arctic, in this wonderful area, to be able to thrive, not just to survive.
Excellent. Well, I think we are all in agreement that the region is a region of complex, intertwined, interconnected issues. But in the end, what we really want to see are thriving communities. So with that, I want to thank all of you for participating. I want to thank the audience for being with us here today. And if you have any further questions for our panelists, do not hesitate to contact the organizers and ask them to facilitate a connection. I'm sure they would love to hear from you. With that, I would like to end this session on empowerment and resilience, and I wish you a good night. Thank you very much. Good to see you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.